Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Larry Cohen.
Here.
Betsy Dennis.
Here.
Jennifer Edge.
Here.
Christine Galvo.
Here.
Frank Garnett.
Here.
Georgia Patchen. Here. Mary Beth Stevens. Excused. Bill Zoff.
Here.
Melissa Thompson. Here. Mr. Hilberg, would you review the fire exits?
Well, the fire exits, you'll still find them in the back of the auditorium. Please don't hesitate to follow the board out in case of emergency.
Okay. Would you like to introduce our workshop?
The winter and early spring of each year in school districts across New York State start a delightful time, budget time. And we had a special meeting last week where we started the budget process and reviewed transportation. And as the board recalls, we were pleased to present a budget that maintains costs at last year's level primarily. And we also had recommended at that time the board consider a proposition for buying new buses as we do each year. And all the rationale was presented to the board, and we still have that. As you know, we will present parts of the budget in the next 2 months for you to look at and digest, and ultimately come to a decision, we hope by the end of March, beginning of April, as to what budget will be put up for the public. For people that are not familiar with what is currently going on in New York State, in Albany, if you travel down the main street, there are several large buildings. And depending which, if you're traveling north, on the right is the state education department. And starting, I think Dr. Walker would help me, maybe 2 years ago, responding to the Race to the Top initiative by the federal government, the Board of Regents adopted a Regents reform agenda, which required schools to move ahead with a much more rigorous pursuit of academic excellence and job and career education and career readiness. So schools across New York State, the 712 school districts, are responding to that with vigor. That initiative requires a lot of energy and a lot of resources. Across the street from the State Education Department, if you're traveling north, is the state legislature, an august body where the greatest minds in New York State meet on a regular basis this time of year to determine the fate of the budget, particularly school districts. And approximately at the same time that the Regents Reform Agenda was being promulgated by the Board of Regents, the state legislature, under the guidance of our governor, passed a property tax cap. That property tax cap only allows school districts in New York State to raise their taxes between 2 and 3%, depending on the exclusions and the formula that each school district has. So there we have it. That's the dilemma that we're facing. We have the added rigor of the Regents Reform Agenda. At the same time, we have property tax cap. And that will be the general theme of the budget for the next couple of months. The board has indicated to us, and we're working diligently to bring a budget to the community that is under the cap but still supports our program. If we start the music, I know I have some people here, we're going to do some magic tricks to try to make that happen in the next couple of months. But you did see transportation, and tonight, after that long fanfare and lead-in, Anne Marie is going to talk about the athletic budget. Eric Romanino planned to be here, but because of the bad weather, he's in charge of the sectional wrestling, I guess it's a championship at Pace University, and that was yesterday and also this evening.
Finals.
So we'll do our very best. If there's some questions we can't answer, we'll get those answers for you or invite Eric to another meeting.
Okay. We enclosed a packet in your board packet of Eric's schedules and information on the athletic budget. I do want to point out I passed out a blue form, so the numbers are a little bit updated. Eric was able to reduce a little bit further from what we had anticipated in 13-14, so that was good. So I'm going to use the blue numbers as far as the budget is concerned. If you open up the packet, the first page in there is the proposed 2013-14 teams that are being offered. And as you can see in 13-14, we are sustaining the same number of teams that we had last year. Eric was nice enough to include some things that we've had to cut in the athletic program in the past. There were certain teams that were not being offered because of participation, and several years ago we had to cut the assistant coaches in various sports, which we are still maintaining that they will not be included in the budget. Probably the biggest financial impact for the 13-14 year is the athletic trainer position that was held by a teacher in the district who no longer does that position anymore. We still have an outside company. We have Orthopedic Associates that provides athletic training services for practices and games, but we do not have a staff member do that. So that was the reduction. That was probably the most significant reduction in that area. So if you flip the page over, we have a athletic budget overview, which shows the number, a comparison of 11-12 versus 13-14. And underneath it is the rationale. So in coaching stipends, there was a decrease of $6,000. That wasn't number of people, that was amounts being given to athletic. We had a few veteran coaches that are not returning, so they would go back to whatever the starting salary was in the BTA contract. The equipment line and the reconditioning line stayed the same. He did, in the contractual area, we did add a little bit more in that area. Remember last year we were doing the budget process, there were certain line items that Eric had to cut, and then we found afterwards that especially in the contractual area we needed to move some money around this year, so we went back to add a little bit more in that area. And the supplies and materials was the same, so there's some price increases due to fuel surcharges, so we added a little bit more in there in that area as well. But overall, in the entire budget, it's pretty much staying the same as far as the program is concerned, as the number of coaches are concerned. It's just a tweaking of numbers between areas. Eric also was able, as you know, he provides this to the board every year, a listing of the contractual fees, just to give you an idea of actually how much it costs to have a sport. And then the BOCES charge, which is probably one of the most significant after the stipends, which is for all the referees that go through Southern Westchester BOCES. And the other pages, again, it's all very informational, so what Section 1 officials cost. We had talked about in years past about not continuing a sport or continuing a sport. So this actually gives you an idea, per sport what it costs, and on the following page is the transportation related to that sport. So a lot of things kind of go into the whole cost process when looking at the athletic area. The following page, Eric was able to give us a comparison across the board from 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13. Actually, he started back at 6, 7 to kind of show the board that, we went into a little bit more of an enhanced program, but because of budget constraints, we were being fiscally responsible. We offered sports that we felt had the participation level, and he did not continue with areas that he thought didn't have enough children involved in that. And the last page, the one with lots of numbers and columns, is the athletic participation in each sport. So you can see that there is a significant amount of children that participate in our sporting program. Overall, we discussed with Eric if we had to go back and make further cuts, what would those recommendations be? And so there may be another discussion about athletics a little bit further on into the process. But for now, when Eric and the superintendent and I met, we talked about modified sports. We talked about all of the sports that we offer here in the district. We all felt that they were important to offer the program, especially since the total amount of the budget was a little bit less, but that moving forward, if we can make all the other areas in the budget work, that this would be a program that we'd want to sustain in the future. Does anyone have any specific questions about the budget numbers or the schedules that Eric provided for you?
I do.
Yes.
The difference in the dollar amount on the coaching stipends of $14,000, is that strictly for the trainer?
Is that strictly for the trainer?
It's listed as a decrease of $6,000, but that doesn't add up.
Yeah, the numbers on the full report don't add up. I'm just going by the blue sheet.
Okay, the blue sheet is what I took from the budget numbers. So are you looking at...
On coaching stipends from last year to this year, you've got a difference of $14,000 on coaching stipends. The only thing that shows being eliminated is the trainer.
Those are all budget numbers. The budget for 12-13 was a little bit higher. I don't think we've spent all of that money, but a significant amount. The athletic trainer stipend was a seasonal stipend, so in total it was about $12,000 of that. So that is not being continued for the 13-14 year.
And the numbers...
If you're looking at the total, Eric doesn't include the chaperone. Is it $10,000 difference?
Right. No, I know
Okay.
those are missing there. The other thing is it shows 48 teams, and no matter how I add up the numbers on the last page, which shows our participation, in the last column, some are marked X, there are blanks, some are shadowed out. No matter how many times I count it, no matter how many exclusions I make, I only come up with 45 teams.
Including the ones with the X's?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I've excluded the ones with the X's. If I included the ones with the X's, we've got about 56 or 58. And it shows that we've only got 48. So I've taken out the ones with the X's. The ones that are just left blank, I assume are all spring, which you don't have subscription yet.
Okay.
So I'm just curious what's missing. What teams are missing?
Well, that's a question for Eric. I'm
Eric.
sorry he's not here, so we'll get that. That's a good question, Larry. Thank you for checking that.
Okay.
We'll get
I will get
back. If
to
you
on
make a
that.
note of that.
Sure.
And the final item was that in the reconditioning of equipment, I know that we discussed, I don't remember if it was last year or the year prior, Eric's presentation, we talked a lot about the change in requirements, especially headgear when it comes to football, and that periodically we're required to buy new equipment. I see that our equipment dollars have remained the same every year.
Right.
Is that covered in there? Because I know that there are times when we can't recondition equipment when the requirements, the codes change, et cetera, et cetera.
I will tell you, depending on the dollar amount, now for the district, the threshold is $500 for the equipment line. So if, I mean, I don't know how much helmets cost. I don't think they cost $500 a piece, so they would be in the material and supply code. So that might be why there's a little bit more money in there. But he does a good job trying to maintain the materials and supplies and, living within his budget. So the equipment line stays even. Those are mainly for larger equipment purchases. We've had to think about doing some things in the fitness center. So his athletic budget, plus we have a budget in the area for the recreation part in a different section of the budget for the facility usage. That has an equipment line, so you kind of move, each share a cost if we have to do a major equipment purchase. So that's why that's kind of stayed the same. So it'll give him the flexibility in case something large does break and it isn't cost beneficial to repair it. But I think the equipment you're talking about, the helmets and the shoulder pads, that all would go into the materials and supply code.
More safety stuff for our kids.
Right. And the reconditioning cost remains, on this remain the same. He's had a tough time with that because some of the equipment is older, but then he may choose then to buy it new. And then he uses, he does a huge athletic bid in the summertime, so he has all the costs and stuff there. So he can use that one if he has to replace it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I have an answer to your earlier question, Larry, on the number of sports.
Yeah.
When you count on the third page, the number of sports, fall, winter, and spring, there's 48 teams. What changes on the back page where they're listed one by one is varsity boys and girls spring track, varsity boys and girls winter track, so they're not broken out in this list.
Gotcha.
So there's the difference between 45.
Because I'm only 3 short.
No, that would be 3, because modified track is listed as boys and girls.
You've got also varsity bowling, boys and girls, varsity spring. You've got one.
That state is one. That's varsity boys and girls bowling state is one.
You've got 5 of them that are listed as boys and girls.
That's state boys and girls, though, even on the front.
But the track is different on the front.
If I took those ones that are listed on that sheet as boys and girls and just separated them as boys 1, girls 1.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that for everyone. If you look at this list
So
here,
you mean how he counts it as 1, maybe boys and girls as 1. I got you. So,
But that's what the difference lies.
You didn't know the secret code. You see that too.
I must have slept through that lesson. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Anne Marie.
Welcome.
We have a motion for executive session.
Motion to adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of a particular person, and the board will return as soon as possible.
Second.
Comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Board will return as soon as possible.